I'm going to throw a curveball then. Did anyone hear that they found organic matter on Mars?
I saw your WhatsApp message.
I'm just like, that's huge. And we're talking about Hugh Edwards. So I assume, so I've got a couple of mates of mine who studied biology at uni, and I went to them and just went, look, what is that definition? And they said, well, it could be dead plant matter. It could be dead animal matter. It could be feces. But they also said, and it says very clearly on NASA, they also said it could be meteorite impact, and it could be water mixing with soil and eventually creating organic matter over maybe millions of years, billions of years, I don't know. But the weird thing is they haven't specified what it is, just that it's organic matter, which I find fascinating in itself. But that's huge because it means you can grow life, I would assume, from organic matter. That would be my assumption.
Would organic matter contain DNA?
It depends what it is. So if it was dead plant matter or bone or feces, then yes. If it's just meteorite organic compounds, then no. It would literally just be a mixture of carbon, I believe hydrogen, and maybe sulfates or something along those lines. I think the more important thing is the fact that, from my understanding, you could grow stuff, which then means there is potential for life on Mars. And they're not even at the, North Pole where there's more likely to be ice and water. They're in the, if I remember correctly, the sort of mid-range of the equator of Mars. So that's...
Isn't it more likely it's just another mistake? Because they keep finding all sorts of things that look like this and that and the other, look like Coca-Cola cans and so on. I mean...
Unless they can bring the sample back, it's...
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I guess they can analyse it. They wouldn't have come out and said it otherwise, would they?
But wouldn't that have been all over all the news if they'd actually found life on... but sure they'd found it.
That's why... That's why I said, isn't it odd that it's organic?
Yeah.
What was it? Organic compound. And I find that odd. Like, why aren't you being more specific? You've got a camera, you can clearly visualize it, but what does that mean in a layman's term? Because I read it and I read through it 3 times and I was like, still not clear. And I had to go to a friend of mine, or 2 friends of mine, 3 friends of mine, who all studied biology at university, to get them to give me a layman's term definition. And those were the basic 5 things that it could be. But why NASA hasn't said anything, I don't know. But I think it's more of the fact, and you're right, it could be wrong, but I assume they wouldn't have said it unless they'd analyzed the soil, which I know they've got the components to, they have the scientific equipment to do on the rover.
I'm sorry to be skeptical about this, but it seems to me that if they had definitely found life on Mars, we would all know about it now. It would have been front page on every newspaper, and it'd been at the top of the news everywhere.
It's not something Matt Damon left behind, is it?
Yeah, it's funny. I admire your interest. It's a bit meh for me, to be honest. I probably missed the point, but yeah. Sorry, I'm not really into compost, Sorry, Alex. You know I love you.
No. All right.
I tell you what, just on that subject, I was watching a program last night about the James Webb Telescope. It's taken 30 years to build, 10,000 people, cost $8 billion. And, it's the most sophisticated instrument ever built. And that's about a quarter of what we spent on Test and Trace, which didn't really work.
That's
quite similar to that. We already had a Test and Trace system for HIV, and they didn't use it.
Really?
Yeah. So instead of going to the HIV department with the NHS and going, oh, you've got this Test and Trace system, can we implement it? How will we expand on it? So mates.
But then how would Dido Harding make all that money if you already used the existing system?
I love the Test and Trace budget as a benchmark. I mean, they're saying, oh, we could never possibly privatize the water industry. It cost £8 billion. Yeah, that's a bargain, isn't it, compared to Test and Trace? Bloody hell.
Do you know how much it would cost to do a green wall across the whole of North Africa? Probably about $2 kilometer in depth to reduce the size of the Sahara. About $1 billion.
Is that all?
That's all. $1 billion. And it's not quick because you've got to let the trees grow, but they've done it in the south. And you
can get some of that compost from Mars down. That would help. Sorry, I'm trying to show interest. Sorry, Alex.
It's good. It's really good. There'll probably be someone in the government trying to figure out how to swindle us on that one.
Yeah.
Special Martian compost.
Yeah.
Someone would probably pay $1 billion to do that. Elon Musk. Oh no, he's got no money now, has he? He's gone apparently bust, hasn't he?
True, yeah.
Is he?
Apparently, something ridiculous like 500,000 or something switched over to this other version of Twitter, which is run by Zuckerberg.
Yeah, Threads. It's awful. I've had a look.
I switched over immediately the moment it was available, and I used it for about an hour, and I've never been back.
Yeah, me too, Michael.
I think a lot of people are the same. What?
It's actually good. I'm new.
It looks the same as Twitter. So you go back to Twitter where you know everybody and you've got your followers and you follow people.
And there's less stuff about cats as well.
Yeah.
And it's got news and literally Zuckerberg's made a carbon copy of Twitter.
Yes, exactly that.
The most disappointing thing, I could see nothing about compost on Mars on Threads, so I thought, no, I'll leave that. Sorry. Sorry.
Fine. Can we get on with the show?
Sorry, yeah.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Roast. I hope you're all very well. We have two wonderful guests back with us again. Let's start with Michael. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Yes, my name is Michael Lambert. I have a YouTube channel where I generally have once a week a good rant about politics and particularly about Brexit.
Very good. Rob, welcome back. Can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the Sunday Roast?
Yeah, nice to see you guys again. Without wanting to echo Michael, I too have a YouTube channel, Truth to Power, with a weekly rant about Brexit and mainly Tory corruption. And Hell to the Lamp. I always wondered what they were talking about when they said the blob. Now I've seen exactly what they mean.
Hell the Lamp.
Hail the Lamb. My wonderful co-host, Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm also known as Political X. I run a YouTube channel and I'm a historian. And my wonderful co-host, I always jump the arm that way, so I'm going to go this way. My wonderful co-host, Max.
Hi, everyone. My name is Max. I run the Robespierre channel where I talk about British politics and, at the moment, Brexit. Alex, what's our first topic of today?
Compost on Mars. That's what we're going to talk about now.
We're going to do a 1 hour special on compost on Mars.
From Mars.
Mars. No, we're going to talk about Brexit. We're going to talk about immigration, emigration, and the birth rate. Rob, what's going on with emigration taking place in the UK right now? Because it looks...
Yeah, it's going crazy. There's actually a big story in the Daily Telegraph this week talking about basically a post-Brexit brain drain. I mean, if you cast your mind back to 2017, there are over 4,000 high net worth individuals. That's people with multi-millions of spare cash for investment overseas. There was a massive surge just after Brexit. That then died down, but it's now picking up with pace. The UK is now the world's third largest exporter of millionaires after India and China, and has actually surpassed Russia for the first time last year. Now, okay, you think kill the rich and everything, but these people are people that are both investing and attracting investment into the UK, and as they walk out the door, so we see further investment in the UK dwindling away as well. So this is a very serious story. The 3,200 I mentioned, though, the high net worth individuals, they are just a fraction of what is basically a stampede from the sinking ship of Brexit Island. Emigration figures for the UK in 2022, last year, were north of 500,000 individuals. And that's not just high net worth individuals, it's highly trained people like doctors, mechanics, plastics technicians, care workers, going elsewhere to get away from high taxation and low wages in the UK.
Mars.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my rant. Sorry.
I did a video some weeks ago, I think it was, where there was a lady who called into LBC, and she was considering moving to Australia because as a nurse the pay was so bad in the NHS, and it's not a criticism of the NHS, it's because the Tories are not willing to invest the resources necessary. But she was talking not just about the pay, but she was also talking about the conditions. That the conditions in Canada or in Australia were much better.
I really, really care, and that's why I started looking abroad, is because you come home at the end of a shift and you think about some of the people that you've seen that day, and you just feel miserable because. So I'll give you an example. There was a man recently that I ended up treating who had end-stage bowel cancer, and he was in A&E. And at the time I came in the morning, he'd been sitting in a chair for 8 hours. And what had happened was his bladder had created a hole towards his bowel just because of where the tumour was. So the reason he'd come in was because he had an infection and he was leaking urine out of his back passage. And he was sitting upright in a chair in the waiting room for 8 hours. This was the last day of his life. He died 12 hours later.
Oh, that's awful.
So this is the kind of thing that you come home and you sit down and you think, this is my foreseeable future. I'm going to be doing this every day. And I didn't really help that man. There was nothing I could do to make it any better for him because we didn't have the resource. So what's the point in me just going in day after day after day if no one's going to change anything?
And what happens is, of course, you have nurses who you want to retain. They're leaving, and then they're leaving a workforce behind which is under even more stress and strain. And I think Rishi Sunak this week, his solution to retention is to impose higher fees on foreigners coming into the country, who are obviously, most of them are coming in to work. So he's going to impose higher fees on them. But how's that going to help?
He also want to get rid of inheritance tax, which brings in 7 billion, which I'm like, right, okay, that's weird. Michael, what do you think of all of this?
Well, I think we all knew it was going to happen. It was bound to happen, and it'll happen more and more. It just makes sense to leave. I mean, why would you stay here? It's a great pity you can't emigrate to the EU. But I have 2 sons, and they're both well educated. They've got very good jobs. They're both in their early 40s. In the last 3 months, one has moved to Bangkok permanently, and the other's moved to Dubai permanently. And they both say it's the best thing they've ever done. They're absolutely delighted. And they come back here and they think this is just crazy land. And I think there must be thousands and thousands and thousands of people like that. I mean, what are you going to stay here for? We can all see it. Everything is sinking.
Oh, the beautiful summer weather.
Yes.
But I think if you think back to the 1950s, when Britain was rebuilding after the war, it attracted foreign labour. But now it seems the idea is, no, we don't want foreigners in. We want to keep as many of them out. And if we can't use legislation to do that, what we're going to do is increase costs so fewer people arrive. Like I think it's a sort of vote winner with the racists and bigots that Rishi Sunak seems to be chasing, but it's detrimental to the economy.
Of course.
Feels like he's feeding the monster that might eventually devour him.
Yeah.
Same with Braverman.
I mean, talented people are not going to come here, so it's the least talented, the unskilled people we're going to need if they're immigrating as well, and then we're going to be going around the country trying to find people in all these very poor countries, particularly nurses and doctors and so on, where they need them, where they spend a lot of money to train them and so on, and we're going to pinch them, and to replace those who've left here. It's absolutely bonkers.
And I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, but I believe the NHS have a sort of code of conduct where they don't try to pinch as many doctors and nurses from developing countries. It's part of their ethos not to do this. So, of course, they're going to be forced to do this because they need the staff. But on the other hand, you have the NHS spending huge amounts of money on the private sector because nurses are being paid up to £300-400 a day if they're from agencies. So we talk about, the right wing will say, well, look at all this money that's going into the NHS and it's not working. But of course, they don't mention where the money is going. And more and more of this money is going into the private sector. If you actually spent the money on, on doctors and nurses who are working within the system, you'd be able to retain them better. So you have this situation where the government are saying we're spending more money on the NHS. It's going into the NHS, but because they can't get the staff they need, they have to hire agency staff. Then they end up spending more and more money on agency staff, which means that they have less money for frontline services. So the system degrades, and the public become more and more angry, and the public say, well, we need to fix this, and then the politicians step in and say, well, privatization is the way to go.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak this week announced a big investment in doctors training to train up more doctors. But it's like turning on the taps with the bath plug empty, because these doctors that we're spending millions to train up are now going off to other countries and using that investment that we've made in them. There's actually other countries that are benefiting.
Do they not have to pay for this training? I mean, they have to pay hundreds of thousands to become doctors.
Apparently, Rishi Sunak made an announcement this week that he was actually providing more funding for training up doctors. So I'm sure they make a contribution, but there is also an investment of many, many millions going into these doctors. And I was looking at the emigration this week. It's the usual suspects that are attracting not just doctors, but all our other professionals. It's America and Canada, it's Australia and New Zealand. But some of the names are quite interesting. If you look within the EU, people are moving to, in the top 10, for example, Latvia, Cyprus, Malta, Portugal. Now, nothing against those countries at all, but we're a much bigger economy here. It's sort of surprising that people would leave here to go to those other smaller economies. But that's the investment walking out the door. Rishi Sunak's making these pledges, and
I was going to say it's all very well Sunak saying, "Oh, we're going to train up our own doctors." It takes 7 years to train a doctor. That's the government after next before any of these people are going to come on stream. It's just ridiculous. In the meantime, they're all leaving.
I find it quite interesting as well, because it looks like the government are going to probably try and come up with ways of retaining the staff through force. They'll say, "Oh, you can't leave unless you paid the money," but I could easily turn around and go, the EU have got a special pass that they're offering to entrepreneurs to come move into the EU.
Grace is an Australian computer programmer. She has just received a job offer from a tech company in Germany and is planning to move to the EU. Cue administrative hassle and paperwork, right? In fact, no. Have you heard of the Blue Card? It is a system that allows highly skilled people from outside the EU to come and work in a European country more easily. The EU's population is ageing, and some sectors, like computer programming, are seeing a shortage of new workers. The Blue Card is a way to support European businesses by making the EU market more easily accessible to highly skilled foreign workers like Grace. To get her Blue Card, she will need to prove that she has an EU work contract or a binding job offer of at least 6 months, and have her health insurance in order. The card will soon have more relaxed eligibility criteria, simplified conditions to bring families together, and will ensure better rights for workers. While the card is an EU programme, European countries are in charge of issuing and withdrawing them.
Under certain criteria, and I believe all 4 of us, although Max is a step ahead, would be and Irish, so that means nothing. So that point was completely silly. But for the 3 of us, we would be able to apply under this because we're all YouTubers. They are looking for people that can work remotely. I know Lithuania are big on this as well, and Latvia.
Estonia, yeah.
Yeah, and Estonia. Yeah, they're all going, yeah, come over here. We'll do tax breaks. And it was interesting you brought up Malta and Cyprus. They're tax havens. That's why they're going there.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, certainly low tax economies. Yeah.
Low tax, yeah. I'm pretty sure Malta's got some dodgy connections with Russian money being filtered through. It was definitely one of the things that came out through the American-Russian interference investigations, that money was being siphoned into Malta and Cyprus and then out into the rest of the EU. So it went through a cleansing operation, essentially.
Yeah, and also their top income tax rate is 35%. Now, I'm not sitting here as an advocate of low taxation, but you mentioned inheritance tax earlier, Alex. I mean, personally, I'd rather that this government taxed unearned income as much as they tax earned income. And I'd also personally rather pay tax when I'm dead rather than when I'm alive. So there's just so many things that I think we're getting wrong with fiscal policy in the UK. And like you say, that's why Malta and Cyprus, these places with lower income tax rates, are cleaning up, just taking all our talent.
Britain isn't as bad as it could, as some might suggest. Cambridge and Oxford are always going to be pools. I can't see that changing in the next 100 to 200 years for university, for example. We've got lots of good stuff happening with fintech at the moment. And the city's an interesting place. I can't say I'm always an advocate of it. In many ways, I'd be happy to criticize it, but it is a economic powerhouse that didn't really even seem to get dented from Brexit, which is ridiculous. We could talk about derivatives and that they're slowly ebbing out and going back into the EU and maybe New York. But in general, it was actually quite an adaptable machine. But it's interesting as well, London itself is quite an adaptable machine, but the rest of the UK, and this is the thing, we were meant to level up. This is downgrading, this is downshifting. And it's because we've got one part of the government, one set of Brexiteers basically saying we want free trade of some sort with a bit of socialism. And you got the other group, which are like Brexit Light or Brexiteer Light, which is the Labour Party. And they're basically turning around and going, well, we want a closed economy, a protectionist economy. And you're going, well, either one of those shrinks and damages some part of the economy. I don't see how you can get out of it unless you look to rejoin. There's no alternative.
There is no alternative.
No. And Adam Possum just wrote a piece on that as well, talking about it. He said, basically, you've got to go for a bit of a socialist policy. You've got to accept that you've shrunk the economy. You're in a medium position. You're no longer a high hitter when you were inside the EU. And the way around it is to put in socialist policies. So develop infrastructure, spend money on that, also on the NHS, and nationalize a number of industries.
Can I just ask a question related to that? And ironically, of course, London and Northern Ireland are the two parts of the UK that are growing at the moment. But when it comes to the Labour Party, who are obviously going to take over, unless something dramatic happens, what are they going to do to undo the damage that's been inflicted? Because I think their hands are going to be tied. It's going to be very difficult to borrow money because the guild prices are going through the roof. It's going to be difficult to tax the lower incomes, so they'll have to tax higher incomes. But they've said that they're not going to do that. And it sounds like the Shadow Chancellor,
Reeves.
Yeah, she's talking about. She hasn't said the word, but austerity seems to be on the horizon, and we know that that's a disaster.
Doesn't work.
They're going to be taking over the most poison chalice ever. I mean, there is absolutely no way it could be anything other than disaster for the next 5 or 6 years. They'll get blamed for absolutely everything, and then the Tories, by the end of the Parliament, they'll have convinced everybody that they're more responsible. I mean, it is such a mess. Unless we start trying to get back into Europe in one way or another, or getting closer to Europe. But all this drivel about what's Starmer's missions, I mean, is making us the fastest growing economy in the G7. I mean, we're an absolute basket case. I mean, we're a charity case right now. How are we going to take America and Japan and France and Germany and Italy and Canada? I mean, it's just utter nonsense.
America won't stand for it. They will hammer us if we try and mess around with Silicon Valley. They will hammer us. They've done it before. Taiwan is a very interesting international. Sorry, Michael, I will bring you back in.
No.
Taiwan's a really interesting one for superconductors. They looked at what the Americans were doing and they went, we can't, if we go into trying to do the software tech and try and be on the same level as Silicon Valley, America's going to push back on us. And they went, right, what can we do to support the American system? And they basically went superconductors and microchips. And that's what Taiwan makes in huge quantities. And that's what they supply to the US, and the US are happy with that. Now, could we do that? Absolutely. Should Europe be doing that? Absolutely. We shouldn't be reliant on just Taiwan, especially with all the tensions that are happening between China and the US at the moment.
But Europe can do that because it has deep pockets. But Britain, now that it's outside, it's very difficult to say, okay, let's open massive manufacturing of semiconductors or something like that. We saw what happened when it came to batteries for electric cars. British Volt just collapsed because it couldn't attract the investment. The
superconductors, I'll bring back Michael. The superconductors in Europe are being made in Holland. So again, tariffs. which we've got coming in October by the looks of things. But I'm not going to go into that. Michael, what did you want to say?
I was going to say, I saw some figures yesterday about AI investment in the world. In 2020, the US invested 38 billion, China 25 billion, and the EU 8 billion. How much do we invest? I don't know, anything? And there's
37. No, that was for something else.
And there's little Rishi Robot telling us that he's going to be setting up a conference, isn't it, where he's going to monitor world's, police the world's AI. I mean, just utterly deranged. What's he going to do? Is he going to get hold of Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and say, come across to London, I want to discuss things with you, I'm going to control the AI for the world? It's so deluded, the whole thing. I mean, just if we're lucky, we might have something like the Taiwanese, have some sort of sector that we can perhaps specialize in, but it's going to be nothing.
We have
against
one.
our problems, it's going to count for nothing.
We have one. It's our arts. Yeah. Arts and services. That's where there's no business in this, probably on the planet, definitely not in the UK, that can compare to the works of Shakespeare. That's brought trillions in. And it's not trillions over a decade or a century. It's over multiple centuries. He's been bringing in and making money for the UK. And I don't know of any business. There are businesses that have lasted longer than Shakespeare. So, for example, in the UK, it's the Royal Mint. In Japan, there is a business that's been running for over 1,000 years, interesting enough, which I believe is a sauna and massage place of all things. But the longest running company in the UK is the Royal Mint. And I would turn around and say Shakespeare probably makes, well, I wouldn't say more than the Royal Mint. I'm going to leave that. I don't know. I don't have the data to make the comparison. But there are not many businesses as big as Shakespeare. There really aren't. Tourism, plays, theatres, you name it.
But also the music industry. You know, look at all the famous groups since the 1950s. Most of them are from Britain. So.
And they're all pissed off with Brexit.
Why should the common people listen to you, Jarvis?
Oh, they don't have to listen to me. I mean, I just turned up and spoke, not as an expert, but as someone who divides his time between living in Paris and London, and so maybe I've got a bit of a perspective on it, you know.
And what is your perspective?
I just don't want to get in terrible queues, you know, when I'm at passport control. Very selfish.
The Pistols were known for being pretty angry about stuff. It sounds like, you know, listening and reading about this single, you're still pretty angry now, is that right?
Well, I kind of think, I did say this elsewhere the other day, I'm not exactly angry, I'm livid with the way things are going on at the moment. You know, the whole Brexit thing, I don't want to go on about it too much, but I think the whole thing's a nonsense. I think it's a dead end, it's a cul-de-sac, and I think the people that are representing us are just up their own backsides, basically. I've never known, I'm 66 and a half, I've seen quite a few, you know, MPs, politicians, prime ministers, and I think they're so brazenly corrupt and that I think it needs to be railed against. That's why I wrote the song, Head on a Stick.
If there is one thing that I've learned as I get older, it's the incredible healing power of love and compassion. And I really believe that we need more love and compassion in the world today. A lot more. I am so sick to death of politicians, especially British politicians. I am sick to death of Brexit. I am a European. I am not a stupid colonial imperialist English idiot. I'm ashamed of my country for what it has done. It's torn people apart. So I want more love in the world. I want us to talk to each other, to come together. And I want us to start.
England in general is a fucking, I mean, what has happened to this country? I've not, well, I have an idea. Brexit happened. Fucking, you know, a lot of people fell under some kind of mass hypnosis. But yeah, it's shit England now. And it was going downhill for a bit, but actually, all works. England in general is a fucking, I mean, what has happened? Brexit's been a disaster for younger musicians because I mean, in the old days, and when I mean the old days, I mean pre-Brexit, you could be a young band and you could kind of go over to Europe and play bottom of the bill in festivals and sort of camp, and you wouldn't be paid hardly anything, but your experience would be life-changing. Whether you went on in the future to do bigger and better things, it doesn't matter. That's kind of sort of like a solid foundation for the rest of your life. And that kind of creativity has been very much curtailed for people on this island because it's expensive now to go over there. It's not straightforward. You have to pay, for visas and all that stuff that weren't necessary. So it's a travesty. Brexit was a travesty, and people are waking up to that now, thank goodness, but it was a disaster. Spiritually, economically, just rubbish. Brexit is rubbish.
But I'll tell you what, you're so right about the arts, because I'll take your point on Shakespeare, but bringing that up to contemporary industries, you look at the video games industry, which I was proud to be a part of for decades. We punch so much above our weight in the UK. The music industry, again, literature, you're absolutely right. What is this Tory government doing in terms of funding the arts? It's seen as like a second choice. There's Rishi Sunak pushing mathematics. What about the arts? It's being completely defunded by this government because the right wing seem to want us all to be Philistines.
GTA, Grand Theft Auto, one of the biggest games ever made, and is in Dundee by a bunch of Scots.
Oh, Dundee is just an amazing place for video games.
Yeah. But was it GTA? Correct me if I'm wrong. Was it GTA that launched it in Dundee, or was there a game prior to that? Do you know?
Oh, I can't remember.
GTA was the big.
We'll say GTA because
Rockstar. Yeah.
That just reminds me of the Arena comment to Anne Widdecombe. Did anyone see that?
What do you think, Marina? There are probably better games for
it's like 4-year-old.
For example, I used to love Grand Theft Auto, which is like
game.
It tells you how to prosper in a criminal world, like being in the Tory party. Yeah. You'd love it.
There we are. It's always got to happen. Let's not ruin the mood.
Get up, Marina.
But on the subject of the performing arts, I mean, it's now very, very difficult. Rob, you know much more about this than I do, but it's very, very difficult to go perform in Europe, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because of all the bureaucracy, and I mean,
I've closed my theatrical agency now. It's closed because I just lost so much business because of Brexit. I used to supply actors to the English theatres in Hamburg, Vienna, Venice, you name it. Frankfurt, and all that business just went with Brexit. It was about a 25% hit to my turnover, and it's just made the whole thing just...
I was going to say, it's like I'm always saying that, every single big business in the world began as a startup, maybe one or two people. And this applies to all, Apple and Microsoft, a whole lot, every big business. And likewise with performing actors and musicians and so on, they all start off small. And if you've got biggest market in the world across the channel and you can't go there, I mean, that restricts your expansion drastically. And so for the opportunity for businesses to grow once they get to a certain size, it's just not there anymore because it's just too difficult.
Yeah, it's true. You can see they're even investing in the EU as a result, which they didn't have to before.
Yeah.
They could have invested in here and just gone and traded straight over there. And now they're having to not invest here and invest over in the EU. We've actually, I've been trying to find out how much money is the EU making out of us because we're now no longer members, but we're still trading with them. They must be making money out of tax and everything else. I threw out the stats, and our lovely friend David Hennick, who's been on here a few times, absolutely brutally shot me down and said that's not how you figure out the cost. But I'm yet to find out how you figure out the cost, and I'm yet to find out what it is. It wouldn't surprise me if it was 50 billion. So we were spending 9 to be a member of the club, and now we have to pay to play. There's a computer game term there for you, Rob. Pay to play.
Well done.
But it's like being a member of a gym, and you pay a membership fee, and you get to use the gym whenever you want, and then you leave saying, "Well, no, I don't need to use the gym," and then you realize after, actually, I do need to use the gym. But then you can't become a member; you have to pay as you use it. It's of course more expensive. But the Brexiteers would say, no, this is the advantage. You're freer to. No, you're not.
Any gym.
And the gym is punishing you for leaving, but not letting you.
That's right. But the gym over in America won't let you in anyway. So.
Well, I was doing some campaigning in Uxbridge, and I went to the Uxbridge hustings. There you go, nice segue. And I got a bit of pushback from people being like, "Oh, the EU's punishing us." What do you guys think of that? Is the EU punishing us, or is this just because we've gone to third country status?
It's so funny that they anthropomorphize the EU as though the EU has got an emotion like revenge or something like that. You know, the EU is basically an administrative organization. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't do things like revenge. It just doesn't. It's, you know, they have a set of rules. They stick to it. That's what the function of the EU is.
But they've actually been quite flexible over Northern Ireland, haven't they?
Rob took the words out of my mouth. There was a spokesperson for the European Commission who was asked a question a bit like that, and he said, "Look, the EU, we don't have emotions. You know, we're like an administration, like a ministry. It's like your council. You know, you can complain to the council, but the council isn't punishing you because they're imposing, you know, no littering laws or something like that.
Yeah.
People can probably feel that they're being punished. Oh no, well, the other people litter and they're only punishing me." But it's this idea that, yeah, it's about we're being punished. No, these were the rules. And the ironic thing, of course, was the UK, when it was at the table writing these rules, said we need to have tough rules for third countries because we don't want to give away benefits. We don't want to be in a situation where there are third countries taking advantage of our situation. So the UK, in a sense, was one of the strongest voices against making it easier for countries outside the EU to operate. So now that it's outside, of course, it's like, oh okay, well, actually, we're suffering that as well. But people, the question, when people say, well, the EU is punishing us, well, I'd have two questions for that. I'd say, well, I thought you were taking back control. So obviously, if they're punishing you and you're not punishing them, who's in control? I don't believe it's about punishment. But the other is, what is your solution? Like, what is your like? There's no point sitting on your hands and complaining, sitting on your arse, I should say, and complaining. You actually have to. What is your solution to that? So if you're saying, well, the EU is punishing us, what are you going to do about it?
Got an ace in the deck. Hold all the cards.
I think the EU are probably very glad to see the back of us in many ways, and they're probably a lot less concerned with us than we are concerned with the EU. I mean, we've lost so much, and they've lost really very little, and they probably made up whatever they lost. But I think on a sort of small level, on a petty level, there probably is a certain amount of resentment. For example, my son went to France a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I think he went to Nice, and he said at the airport, he said there was the queue for the EU members and for the non-EU members, and he said there was 3 or 4 customs guys around the EU entry, and there was just one guy on the non-EU, and he said it was absolutely obvious this guy was just holding everybody up, and he was just wasting time and just causing a lot of annoyance. And I think a lot of people resent what we've done, and resent us for complaining so much about them. I mean, our government's been complaining so much about the EU, and it's so rude, so insulting. No wonder some of them are a bit cross about it.
Well, that's all they've got to do, isn't it? The British government. They haven't got anything else, so they have to create culture wars and animosity with the EU. I mean, you look at this as a World War I perspective, and you look at all the things that build up to World War I. Just wrote a book on it, and you can easily see. There's a plug there.
Where's the book?
Link in the description.
Where's the book? Somewhere. You can see the similarities. I mean, we put a warship out into the channel because of the French fishermen. And you're going, that's really similar to some of the crap that went on during World War I. The Kaiser of Germany sent in a warship into Agadir to quell down interest from other European powers as a show of force. You're going, that's so similar. It almost feels, and I get this a lot. I mean, I was at the Uxbridge hustings, and the conspiracy theory shit that came out of Lawrence Fox and Piers Corbyn was just unreal. But there's this level of, and UKIP, there's this level of they don't learn from history. This is the old adage and cliche, which is absolutely true. They seem to think, and I've seen this with Farage as well, oh, that's in the past. Humans have moved on and become brighter, more intelligent creatures. And it's like, no, we're still in a capitalist system, which essentially helps to exacerbate or put on steroids competition between nations. And the only thing we found so far to resolve it is to actually unite and start to find similarities more than differences and to stop competing with each other. But someone like Farage is absolutely determined to, and so with a lot of the people there at the hustings, absolutely determined to believe that somehow human beings have moved on and we're not competitive enough that we could even remotely walk back into a World War I or II. It's almost 3 strikes and you're out. I think there was even a neocon idiot at the National Conservative Convention who was going, oh, nationalism isn't so bad. The Germans just went out of hand on World War I and II. And you're like, no, they're humans. We do this a lot when we come up with these crazy social constructs.
When you say,
go on, Michael.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you say people don't learn from history, people don't learn from what happened last week. I mean, people have got very short memories, and yeah, I mean, it's. I think most people are not interested in current affairs very much, unless it's Hugh Edwards. They're not interested in politics very much, and they're very easily swayed by very persuasive characters like Farage and Boris Johnson. I mean, these people have got fantastic personalities which are able to sort of rally a crowd, and I mean that's really the root of all our problems, isn't it?
There were 2 or 3 people in Uxbridge who were going, it's a conspiracy against Boris. And you're going, what? They bribed the police to nail to rights the Prime Minister?
Then why did he resign? If it was a conspiracy, why didn't he fight his corner?
Why did 4 Conservatives vote against him? The majority of the committee vote against him because of the evidence. Why have our security services repeatedly said he's a threat? Why have the Canadian security services said he's a dodgy character? Why have the American secret services said Boris is a dodgy character and the mates that he hangs around with are dodgy characters?
And the Italians. Yeah.
And the Italians.
But something I find fascinating about Johnson and Farage is that if you were to point out the lies that they have spread, most reasonable people would say, yeah, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. But then when you ask them, why do you support them? They were like, well, because they're honest. And it's like, but when you dig down a bit deeper, it's because, well, he wouldn't lie to me. He's lying to everyone else, but he's not lying to me. And this is the thing, I think, is with Johnson in particular. So many people voted for him in 2019 because they knew, yeah, he is a liar, but he's probably telling the truth when it comes to Brexit. And now that that's fallen apart, they're like, well, he's probably telling the truth when he's talking about what he was doing during the pandemic. But he's probably telling the truth.
All of them.
Yeah, yes. But it's completely nonsensical. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say he gets away with so much because he's entertaining, he's funny. I mean, if there's an interview with Boris Johnson on you probably watch it because you know he's going to say something funny, something witty, and they forgive him an awful lot just because of that. And this expression, oh, it's just Boris, he gets away with so much for that. I think as far as Farage is concerned, he's just one of us, you know, he's just, you know, the guy down the pub. And, you know, he's got the same interests as us at heart, and he talks sense.
Private educated, city worker, multi-millionaire who banks at Coates. Yeah, he's just like us. I do all of that on a daily basis. Rob?
The other reason they get away with it is they say, yeah, Boris Johnson lies, Farage lies, but come on, they all lie. They're all as bad as each other. I had my own daughter say that to me recently. Oh, I don't know why you get so upset, Dad. They're all as bad as each other. You know, so you can put Suella Braverman and Yvette Cooper in the same box, you know. It's just crazy. But that's like you said earlier, people aren't that interested in politics and current affairs. So it's just very lazy, very easy for them to say they're all as bad as each other. You know, what do you do with that?
There's an element of truth to it. I mean, look at Starmer. He's flip-flapped on just about everything.
Yeah.
And you just end up going, right, so you're a Brexiteer then. Okay. It's funny. I find that funny as well, that you don't hear people saying that Labour Party are now a Brexit party. They are. They're Brexiteers. They must be. If they're saying Brexit must work, then they are Brexiteers. I can't.
It's so frustrating.
Am I mad there in suggesting that?
But it's frustrating because whenever the question of Brexit is brought up, their first response is, "Look, that happened years ago. We don't want to reopen the old wounds. We want to move on. We want to make it work."
It's like saying, we know we're driving to the wrong town. We're going the wrong direction. We want to go somewhere else, but we made the decision to go the wrong way. So let's carry on.
It's like jumping out of an airplane. We can all do this. I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone says. It's like jumping out of an airplane and finding out you don't have a parachute, but there's an emergency cord, and you go, no, I've made my decision. I'm not pulling the emergency cord.
Well, come on, Alex. It would be very undemocratic to pull the emergency cord.
We had a vote.
We had a vote. Yeah.
But what is fascinating is that the Labour Party, they cannot see that this isn't going to work. Or can then? Are they lying? Why are they lying? You get this. The people will say, "Oh, well, he's got to say that to get elected." And when he gets elected, then of course we'll see what he really means. But it's absolute nonsense. The majority of people do not want to remain outside of the EU. The majority of people think it's a mistake.
Yeah.
So he's forming his policies. And all his pronouncements are about attracting that ever shrinking minority. Daft.
I'm gonna loop something back in. So we've got similar statistics to the ending of the Vietnam War. That's how much Brexit's hated. It's as hated as the Vietnam War, according to the polls. Mm. But I'm not seeing much in terms of music and art coming out against Brexit. Am I too old? Am I missing something here? Am I missing that the youth generation are railing against it? I can think of Stormzy railing against the Conservative Party, but not against Brexit. I mean, that's the only artist I can think of that's even come close to hating Brexit.
It's different. Brexit is affecting everybody. Everyone is very anxious. With the Vietnam War, majority of people were not affected. They just wanted to end it, especially young people. But in terms of Brexit, everybody is anxious, everybody's worried, everybody is suffering, and they know they're going to go on suffering. So it's not really something to.
I will dissect that. So President Johnson, of all names, President Johnson, basically, there's even an actual direct comparison between President Johnson and Prime Minister Johnson. President Johnson said that if the Vietnam War hadn't gone ahead, he would have had a huge social welfare program go ahead. And so did Dr. King. They're both saying, instead of spending money on blowing up people, we could be investing that back in the US. But the comparison of the floods, Boris Johnson took, about 2 to 3 weeks to get up to the north when it flooded really badly, and the Northerners let him know it.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm not very happy about talking to you, so if you don't mind, I'll just know tell me what I'm doing. Right. You've not helped us express I don't want you to do so.
Took your time, Boris, haven't you?
Yeah. Where you been?
All right.
Well, we've been on it round the clock. We've been on it round the clock. Is there anything in particular that you'd like us to do to?
No, thank you.
No.
No.
You've got everything you need, then.
We want to know why has it took you so long, 5 days, Boris, to come and see us here? What's the answer, please?
The answer is that people have been working round the clock to address the problems here in Stainforth.
We are, yes, we know. Where have you been?
I was here Saturday dinner. Me and my 3 daughters and about 10 other ladies from the community. We was here for 48 hours with nobody from the council, no help.
If the community can come together in such a short time to respond to the needs, to those people that have been devastated, upset, emotionally, lost their livelihoods, their possessions, and it took you over 5 days. You should have been there Saturday morning having a meeting, making sure that these people get the help and the support. And I'm sorry, your announcements yesterday was a pittance.
You made the statement, it's not an emergency.
It is an emergency, Boris.
Actually, I came to, if I just...
Well, let's speak.
Let's have a thank you, just try to answer I did come up immediately to Matlock in Derbyshire to see because that was the area that was badly affected, as I was told then. And people have been working round the clock since the crisis began. And I do totally understand the feelings of frustration. I think one of issues at the moment is that the insurance systems don't seem. People are worried about the insurance. So I want to stress that there is insurance for flooding, and we in the government will help with that.
Is that a promise though, Boris? Because you promised us months ago that you were going to give our community £25 million to make these communities better.
Towns fund.
For town funds. We're still waiting for it, Boris.
Well,
so are you just sat here now? Is that a lie again?
We
need to know. We need help. Honestly, the people were walking in here yesterday, Boris. You didn't see them. Little girls from Fish Lake with no shoes on their feet, Boris. A lady, a 78-year-old lady, Boris. Honestly, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. What about people? It's heartbreaking, Boris. Obviously,
very passionate. People have put a lot into this.
The president ordered all sorts of things done, red tape cut, the federal government.
The house of New Orleans is still underwater today. No one can accurately calculate the damage left in the hurricane's wake. It will run into tens of millions, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars. In many cases, the devastation was extreme.
The hurricane damage for himself last night after a flying trip found the floods worse than expected. Atop a bridge in the dark, the president talked to William Marshall, 74, driven out of his home and no place to sleep.
President Johnson had a similar problem in Orleans. It took him 24 hours to get out there, and he was wading in the water, calling people to come out of the houses so they could be rescued. That's an interesting difference between President Johnson and Prime Minister Johnson.
I think there's been a massive backlash against the Tories because people feel that it's possible to change it. While with Brexit, they understand that it's going to. I believe that many people understand it's going to take a long time. So it's not. So a lot of people on in social media, whatever, can attack the Tories because it's something they feel that it's something they have some control over, and that if there's an election within the next number of months or in the next year, they can actually have some impact there. But when it comes to Brexit, there's very little people can do because it's in the hands of the government.
Yeah, it's just a feeling of hopelessness, I think, especially when you've got the leader of the official opposition standing up. And as Alex was saying, is just as Brexity as Sunak. I mean, it's just engenders a feeling of hopelessness that, what can be done.
I think as well, in addition to the economic despair and the no sign of any way out, we've also got all this corruption and this seeing all these politicians and their friends making so much money and really laughing at us, which we've never had before. We've never had this collapse of standards and the utter incompetence, and so all the public services collapsing and so on. That has never happened before. I mean, it's really a really grim situation we're in.
What one thing would you do to make things, or what thing would you say exists that is a positive within all of this? And I'm going to throw that over to Max first.
Oh, why me first? Positive? How do I find something positive here? Are you talking about politics in general, or what's happening
within the UK?
Britain is still able to attract great minds. So that there are not in the sense of businesses and investment, but there are, as you pointed out at the beginning, there are universities like Cambridge and Oxford are still able to, because of the name as well and because of the tradition, they're able to attract great minds. And something frustrating is that there are great people starting up companies, but then what they do is they move the operations abroad because they can't continue to expand. So somebody comes up with a wonderful idea. They want to develop it. They want to manufacture something, but they can't because the infrastructure isn't there. So you have people, inventors, for example. So many inventions over the last 200 years came from Britain, but over the last 30 years, well, let's say the last 10 years, a lot of that has, the invention starts in Britain and then the operations are moved abroad because they can't find the staff or they can't manufacture. I think that's so. The positive is yes, it's attracting.
Wonderful the positive, then you sank it.
Yeah, so
Michael, what's your positive?
My positive, I got a YouTube channel. I think that's I can't think of anything. I heard a discussion. I think it was The Spectator talking about it last night, and they were saying, "Can you think of any positive?" And nobody could think of anything. I mean, there aren't any positives. No. I can't think of anything.
The only positives I can think of are the polls showing that we've not got too much longer to put up with this appalling gangster government. I mean, that's the only positive I can think.
I'm gonna end on a high note. I think the youth, they are pushing right against this at the moment. I can't see how anyone's going to change the situation, no matter who they are, unless we go back in.
Yeah, well, that links to my point about the polls as well, Alex. I mean, a recent poll said that only 1 in 20 people under the age of 30 are actually pro-Brexit. 19 out of 20.
Wow. What is that? What is that for the Tory party as well? Because I know they're panicking like crazy because they can't get youth.
Yeah, I don't know the figures, but it's similar, isn't it? It's yeah. Because even as people get older, you look at the demographic in 10 years cycles. As people get older, they tend to traditionally vote more to the right. But what people don't realise, that's not a function of age. That's a function of life, that you acquire a house, you get a better job. And of course, in Tory Britain, that's just not happening. So this trend that they expect, people are getting older and still voting to the left, to the Progressive Party. So that's going to be their undoing. That's a positive.
I remember there was a UKIP guy who was, I don't know if he was running for mayor or something of some town. It was a recent thing. And he was asked about, what are your policies? And he couldn't name one. Like, he couldn't actually come up with a policy. He was like, well, you know, we're Labour are doing a bad job and stuff. Yeah, but what are your policies? What are your policies? And he's like, well, you know, he was like, oh, sorry, I didn't know you were going to ask me these questions. I would have prepared better.
I saw that, Mark, as well, yeah. He said, well, they're not actually that different to the Conservative candidates' policies, but we're going to do them better.
And that's us done.
The sad thing for all these young people, though, is that there's going to be nothing left for them. I mean, they're going to be starting off with such a mess.
On that cheerful note.
Yes.
Bye-bye. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Be sure to tune in next week for another exciting story from the files of Police Squad.